I had planned on grabbing one of the Kurt Vonnegut books that I have on my bookshelf to read, because one of my favorite things to do, like any kind of vacation, whether it's camping or going on the beach, is just sitting with like a beer in one hand and a book in the other and just chilling out and reading. And I picked up Kale and realized that I forgot to get a book, so we had to stop by a bookstore on the way to go camping.
What did you get?
So I actually got Galapagos by Kurt Vonnegut because
oh, nice.
Vonnegut's always great because he's hilarious. The chapters are really short, so if you only got a few minutes, you can just blast through one pretty quickly, and it's easy to read and short. And so I walked into this tiny little bookstore, and we just walked in and I was like, "Where's your Kurt Vonnegut section?" And the guy walked me over, and they only had like 3 books of his, and I was like, "Oh, well, I haven't read this one," so I grabbed it. And, it was a blast. Got a little too drunk Friday and Saturday night. But there's something about sleeping in the woods. Hangovers don't last as long whenever you wake up with the sun, make some coffee, take some ibuprofen, and then sit by a creek and read a book.
We all need to be outside more often.
Did you finish the book?
No, I was a little too hungover to read a whole lot, so I'm only about halfway through. So I'm working through finishing it right now.
I actually haven't read that one.
Yeah, it's one of his later novels, and I never thought that I would be the kind of person that could tell by someone's writing style, but I can tell because I've read enough of his books to be able to tell, like, oh, this is definitely one of his later books.
Got it.
I finished Mother Night on our trip that I just got back from last weekend, and to your point, Jensen, sitting on the beach, just a cooler right next to me. I was just drinking some Coors Light, some of that Colorado Finest, and just Mother Night is such a fantastic book, like beginning to end, and it's honestly one of his easier narratives to follow. Like, it's just a pretty straightforward tale, and I really appreciate that. And I ended up, I read it in 2 days, and then I gave it to my dad when I got back. And I was just like, "You're gonna love this," and like, it's time for you to get into Kurt Vonnegut, because I've just found myself, I cannot read enough of his stuff. It's just so it's hilarious. It's genuinely hilarious, but so poignant and so powerful in the same. And that's what I love about him. He's just awesome, and just so quotable, like so quotable. I know we were talking about we need to get like So It Goes tattoos eventually, like
for sure.
1,000 subscribers, we'll all go get So It Goes tattoos.
Yeah.
No, that
if we get 5 subscribers, I'll get it So It Goes tattoo.
No, there's the I guess what would you call the little piece that he writes at the beginning, the preface of that novel, like lives rent free in my head, where he says, I don't know what the moral of many of the stories that I've written is, but I know the moral of this one, which is we are who we pretend to be. So we must be very careful of who we pretend to be. Mm-hmm. And I thought about that so much just in any of my like creative endeavors or anything, that you have to be real careful about the image that you're putting out into the world. Because you end up you may not actually end up becoming that, but for all intents and purposes, like the way that you're perceived is kind of who you are to other people,
Especially in like today's day and age, where we only know each other, and so many relationships only happen like over the internet, and it's only whatever you decide to put out there. And that's why it's so easy to get like suckered into, like, to your point, someone who you're not actually supposed to be.
In the social media age, that hits a little different. Yeah. Because
everybody's
putting a little projection out there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there pretending to be stuff.
100%. 100%. Well, it's good to see you, boys. I know we haven't gotten together. Man. Jensen, I got to just see you just a couple hours ago. But Taylor, like, we got to get you down here. So,
I know. I'll come down soon. We'll do an in-person hang soon. Well, while we're on the topic, I was wondering about this earlier, about what we might be able to talk about, and I would love to hear from y'all, because I don't think we've really ever talked about this as a group. Like, What are some real early memories that you guys have with reading books? Like maybe the first book that really grabbed you, or I don't know, some poignant memory of reading that you have, or something that got you hooked on reading as a pursuit or an activity. You want to go, Jensen? Got one?
Oh man, I was hoping I would have a second to try to grab the memories. I think probably the first book I read on purpose was the second Harry Potter book, because I saw the first film, and my aunt was really into Harry Potter, so she lent me the second book, and I read books 2 through 4, and I wasn't really much of a big reader, and I wasn't again after I read those books, and it took me forever, and then I went several years without ever like really reading a book on purpose again, and it wasn't really until a few years ago, whenever I came up for your birthday and we were hanging out, we were talking about books, and I finally picked up 1984 and read that, and that started me on my journey and what led to us starting book club.
That's a great jumping off point book. I feel like a lot of people get that one as an assignment in high school, and so it's kind of become like a cliche in a way. Like people will be like, "Oh, like you're not a deep reader if that's like one of your favorite books," but it's a genuinely great book. It's really good. Orwell is such a good writer.
For sure.
Do you have one, Will?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I just remember growing up reading or being read to by my dad Edgar Allan Poe stories. Like he had this basically book of just all his stories in one, and there were illustrations of his stories like on one of the pages, this particular edition. And you know, Edgar Allan Poe, one of the greatest like horror authors of all time, you know, just an amazing author in so many ways, but these illustrations were super visceral and very scary for a young kid. But I found myself like going into the library and like when my parents weren't there, just pulling that book off the shelf and just like looking at these images, because I was just so drawn into the story and like, you know, just this super just insane, like genuinely insane tales oftentimes with Edgar Allan Poe. And so that was what that was one of my earliest memories, for better or for worse, is just like diving into Poe. And then like as I got older, I remember being in like kindergarten, and I say I was being read to Poe at a very, very young age. I was in kindergarten going into first grade, and I was like, man, I want to read a chapter book. Like, that's so cool. Like, I want to say I read a chapter book. And I got into Berenstain Bears, you know, and that was like my first chapter book. And I felt so just like proud to be able to do that. And of course, Jensen, you know, then you go down the Harry Potter route and like just read a lot of these tales, and, you know, fantasy and was a really big one. My teacher in fourth grade, I think, she introduced me to the Redwall series. And like I loved those. Just those are really cool. I remember flying through those. But to your point, like you get into school and you do so many other things. I was playing soccer, and you know, we were playing in a band. And I just sort of like stopped reading for whatever reason, even though I loved it. Like I always found myself, you know, loving a book. And it wasn't until we really started having, you know, conversations about books and why it was important that, you know, I found myself, you know, drawn back into that love. And like now, I mean, because we started our own book club, that's when I've discovered my favorite books of all time. You know, like we read East of Eden, and that book has just sat with me and changed me in so many ways, genuinely. And I'm like, imagine if I had never read that. And especially like never read that now that I'm a dad, like that just, you know, I wouldn't have had some really unique perspective on, you know, just like what parenthood and that relationship is like. So, yeah. So yeah, great. You know, took the whole world of, you know, literary there, just like reading literature from fantasy all the way to, you know, East of Eden. But yeah, found some of my favorites, and like really glad that we're diving back into this and at least starting a forum for more discussion, because who knows what other book I haven't read yet that's going to change me, you know? So
absolutely.
I find it funny that you had a fourth grade teacher that introduced you to a book series. I think by the time I got to fourth grade, my English teachers had given up on me ever like being more than like functionally literate. But But
They
Taylor,
they didn't give you any assigned reading to take home, did they?
No chapter books for Jensen.
No.
It's okay, honey. You're gonna be pointing at pictures on menus. It's okay. Taylor, what about you? What's your childhood memory or whatever of growing up and learning to read?
Yeah, there were always like books in the house we were encouraged to read growing up. I remember like real early. I'm sure that these are fairly well-known books, but I haven't met a lot of people that had read them. But there was this series called The Boxcar Children. Have you guys ever heard of this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think they were like really famous, like maybe in like the 50s and 60s or something like that. And I think that my dad maybe had read them as a kid, and so he suggested those, and I remember reading those and really enjoying them. And then I remember a very like specific memory that when we were still living in Florida, I would have been in probably maybe third or fourth grade. We went to Walmart of all places, and they had a in-cap display before you got to the cash registers of these 99-cent paperbacks that were like classics. And I remember my dad noticed it and was like, "Oh, they've got these old Mark Twain, the Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, and there was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and stuff like that." And he was like, "Did you ever read or ever hear of Tom Sawyer?" And I was like, "I think I only know that there's a ride at Disney World that is something about Tom Sawyer." And so he bought me both of those Mark Twain books, and I loved them as a kid. They were just so funny and fun and adventurous. And then revisiting, especially Huckleberry Finn as an adult, I was like kind of blown away by how much I'd missed in it when I was a kid. Like, there's kind of a lot going on in that book. It's really, really good. And
also, Tom Sawyer is an asshole.
That is an iconic scene, tricking somebody into whitewashing his fence for him. Mm-hmm. But that just kind of got me. I was just interested in books. I really liked to read, and so I remember 2001 was when I saw the first Lord of the Rings movie. We rented, I think, the VHS. I didn't see it in theaters because it was PG-13, and we weren't quite sure yet if it was age appropriate, So once it had like come out on video and been pre-screened, they were like, "Yeah, you can watch this," and that pretty much blew my mind. That movie, and I was just obsessed with Tolkien after that. And like, I remember going to Barnes and Noble with one of my buddies, and we thought we were like very grown up and cool because we both bought the Two Towers book. And then we sat at the like in-store Starbucks and had like a hot chocolate, And I was like, that really like set my aesthetic up for like most of my life. It's just like, I still like, if I can smell coffee and books at the same time, it's just like perfect environment for me. And I loved Lord of the Rings. I read all of those as a kid and just continued reading. I think that like when I started to get really more like seriously interested in books a bit later, I had a really good high school teacher. Actually, two in a row. I had two really good English teachers in high school. In 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I had the same teacher for 11th and 12th. And I remember in 10th grade, we did this whole segment on transcendentalism. And we had to read a little bit of Walden, which I was like blown away with. And so I went and bought Thoreau and read that, and read Civil Disobedience and read a little Emerson, and I liked, I think at that point I still liked the idea of reading and being a reader more than I understood the books that I was reading, but that came with time and a few more good teachers to kind of instill some good reading habits. And yeah, so school for me actually introduced me to some really cool stuff. And I just kind of stayed on that trajectory, I guess, as an adult. Well, and I have to say this too, this is like an honorable mention, but something that made me really serious about reading when I was in my early 20s was right before I moved to Nashville to be a songwriter, I met a songwriter who was an idol of mine at a show. And it was a small show at a kind of a local place up in Georgia that you guys know that you played with me at. And I remember asking this guy, because I was blown away with his songwriting. And I asked him, which was so funny and kind of naive as like a 20-year-old. I was like, what do I need to do to one day be able to write like you? And I'll never forget it. He said, read a lot and then learn how to bleed out of the hole in your guitar. And I was like, dang, dude. And I was like, all right, I have to get serious about reading. And I remember I moved to Nashville like a month after that, found a used bookstore, and I just started buying stuff that I had heard of. Faulkner, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, just buying stuff and like trying to understand it and like having no context for most of it, understanding like 30% of a lot of the stuff, you know, trying to read Camus when you've, you know, not really read much existential literature stuff. Was like, it was all over my head, but I was starting to kind of learn, and eventually like making friends that were big readers and getting to bounce ideas off and hear people talk about books and what they mean to them and all this kind of stuff kind of led me to wanting to involve all of my friends in reading so that it wasn't such a solitary experience, you know?
I appreciate that, Taylor. And I think I want to go back to also just like a little bit about our history, the three of us, just because we all grew up together. We played in bands together. Like we always loved to have really good conversations. And it wasn't really around books growing up, like, right? It's just the normal, you know, kind of normal noise as young kids and teenagers and then young adults. But like what I've loved is like, as we've gotten older, and like Taylor, you introduced, you know, me to books that I would have never picked up, you know, ever. Like, I'm just would have never found myself interested in them. And I appreciate that you sort of like started to carve that way and like, hey guys, like this is something cool. Like maybe we look into this, you know, as well. And like, again, found myself sitting on the beach, you know, with Kurt Vonnegut recently and being like, this is what I live for now. Like, this is really like, this is peak living. And, really appreciated that about kind of just our relationship as a whole. And then also just like making time and space to like talk about something new. And I want to share this too, because I just was listening to a podcast with Ken Burns, and he said, I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but he said something akin to like, books are the greatest mechanical like invention, you know, and like one of the, like in the world, like ever, like, you know, just the fact that we could pour so much thought and like emotion and, you know, like so much into these, you know, tactile pieces of, you know, like earth essentially. And it can, you know, it can move mountains in so many ways. So I appreciate that just about the medium itself. It's just truly like one of the best, you know, I like that quote. I thought it was great.
Sure. Well, we always bring up like that we grew up playing in bands together. And I think in a way, like I am a few years older than y'all, but I definitely took the longest to actually mature. But what's really funny is every single time I see Taylor's dad, and like if we're in a group, he tells them how he remembers me and Taylor at 14 playing in bands together, and I'm like, nah, dude, I met your son like right as he was about to graduate high school. Like I was not there. It's like, no, I just had the maturity of a 14-year-old.
It's a common mistake. No, that's fun. So me and Will have known each other since we were 14. And we were in a band together when we were 14, and those photographs may surface one day on the internet. That was right in the sweet spot of 2004, 2005 emo, you know, thing, and we were all in it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, do you remember how you became our lead singer, right? You had to go and audition playing
in your parents' living room.
Yeah, Kyoto's. we said, can you come in? Yeah, you were like, can you come and do these screaming vocals? And you could, and we were like, "You're in." He's immediately in.
I had to go to Best Buy and get that CD so that I could learn it.
Also, I love the fact that we were 14 years old and thought you had to audition for our 14-year-old like band, like we were that good, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the few auditions I passed. So.
Well, Taylor, do you want to talk a little bit about like what this kind of podcast and what we're trying to do is all about?
Yeah, I kind of touched on it a little bit before. Reading is sort of a solitary thing just by its nature. You have to be alone in a quiet room. You kind of have to block out the outside world and pay close attention to something tactile that you're holding in your hand. And it doesn't really lend itself to, hanging out with your friends and stuff. But the discussion aspect of it is so integral to understanding things and synthesizing all these ideas and just honestly like getting to know your friends better, because you learn a lot about somebody by how they interpret something or how something makes them feel when they read it. I've been seeing there's kind of a narrative going around that men especially, but people in general aren't reading as much. I think that a lot of people are probably reading. There just aren't a lot of places to talk about reading, maybe. Maybe especially for guys. They don't know where to start with reading, maybe. They like the idea of it, like I mentioned I did when I was, a late teen. I liked the idea of being a reader, but didn't really have someone to mentor me through the process and help me refine my taste or find what I like. And so, me and Will is kind of the impetus of this whole thing. Me and Will and Jensen, actually, all three of us went to a music festival last year, and we were sitting up really late one night, having a few beers and chatting about one of the books that we had been reading together, which I actually can't remember what it was now. And Will suggested at that point, he was like, man, this discussion aspect of just like getting to hang out with you guys and talk about these books has been such a hugely positive thing. We should try to share this with people. And I think if anything, that's my goal, is to share the love of good books and give people a place to talk about them and discover some things that they maybe don't know, and hopefully even discover a few things about themselves in the process,
Absolutely. No, 100%. And I remember that conversation because I meant it so like wholeheartedly. And I mean, for me too, like these discussions, it gave me, motivation to read hard things, to go and like have a journey into Dostoevsky that I would have never attempted alone, just because I was like, well, who, to what end? For me, it was just like, well, I don't understand half of this book, like the context in it. Like I need some support here, but I didn't know where to go. And also like, me personally, like, I'm in marketing. That's my day job. So digital marketing in particular. So I'm on the internet all day. Right. Like, so I have to consume so much content, and I found myself just being so drained by that and needing something to pull myself out of that, especially, getting lost in the doom scroll, spending an hour and a half. Again, we all do it, and there's nothing wrong with, spending time online. But like, I felt at the end of those, those just kind of mindless sessions, I was like, what am I doing? Like I could have, been doing something so much more productive and maybe so much more enjoyable, because usually by the end of it, I'm just not feeling great. And so, for me, this was more just like, motivation and a reason to like keep reading and keep trying and doing that. And also, like, I know not to get, like deep into this by any means, because I think there's a ton of value to it, but like, we're outsourcing so much of our brains now to like AI, like the cognitive decline, honestly, it's insane. Like, humanity is, I think something came out recently about like, they did a brain scan while someone was interfacing with, an AI essentially. And it was just like blank, there was just like nothing going on in there. And so it's like, I found myself in this almost like, heroic way. Like, you know what? I'm going to feed my own brain, with something really, great that I can hold on to. Kind of not, again, to take a stand against AI by any means, but just to, I don't know, keep myself sharp. So that's what I appreciate again about those discussions. And that's why I remember, like I said, I remember that conversation vividly because it truly did have like a positive impact on me as a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like I am the prime customer for content like this because I think a few years ago, Will, you and I were hanging out and I was talking about another aspect. Like we've talked about, men don't read anymore, but men are also just progressively get lonelier every year they get older. And for me, like I appreciate being able to have community and friends that I know that I'm going to talk to, once or twice a month. And we're not just going to throw back beers and talk about sports and then deal with a hangover the next day. Like we can have an enriching discussion, and it can shape how I see the world and how I deal with the, general anxieties or whatever that I might be facing, or deal with my own personal demons that I can see like played out in a book and learn how to process those things.
No, that's great. That hits on a pretty important thing too that I've noticed for myself is these books, just because of the very nature of like what reading is, kind of staring, like you mentioned, staring at something from the earth and hallucinating for a while, you end up seeing yourself reflected back a lot. And a lot of the time too, what you see reflected back isn't necessarily something that you care to know about yourself. It can be a little disorienting sometimes to realize that you're reflected a little bit more in the underground man than you would care to admit, or something like that. And especially in that light, being able to have some friends that you trust, that you can get together with and talk about these things and be like, man, the ending of Notes from Underground just like gut punched me and I don't know how to feel about it. and then you find out that all your friends felt the exact same way and you're not just a psychopath.
Yeah, that's actually funny. Like, I think that there's a thing that you have to do, and I think having a group of people that you can discuss the literature with, because before we started doing the book club and stuff, I'd said I'd started reading after spending the weekend up in Nashville with you over your birthday a few years ago, and I had started reading a few things, and then you suggested Crime and Punishment to me. And so I got it on audiobook. It was one of those older translations, so that didn't help. But like, I remember you asked me how it was going, and I was like, I can't do it. Like, this character sucks. I can't. I don't like him. And you're
so
like,
bad.
yeah, that's the point. So finally, like, after having that shift and us reading together and learning that perspective of this character sucks, and you hate him because you see yourself in him, and learning like to notice those things and see those thoughts or ideas or decisions carried to their logical conclusion, and being able to stop yourself before you end up murdering a pawnbroker.
Right. Hopefully it doesn't come to that.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to ask yourself the question before you get to that.
We are dropping references to like all the books that we've read as like our own personal book club. So that actually brings me to what actually are we even reading first in this book club?
Good question. I thought a lot about this, and I think maybe Jensen has read this book before, but I know Will hasn't yet, so this will be a little bit of a surprise and it'll be kind of fun. But I think that a great one to start off with is something a little shorter, but deals with a lot of really interesting themes that are ripe for discussion, which is Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich. It's one of his later books, a bit later in his career, and I found it to be really accessible when I first read it. It's real short, like I mentioned. Shouldn't take particularly long to get through. The language is easy to decipher for the most part, other than having to learn why every Russian person has like 4 names, you know. But we'll talk about that. It deals with death and, you know, going through the process of dying, what it means to have a good death, what it means to have a good life. I saw somebody one time said of the death of Ivan Ilyich, and I wish that I could remember whose quote this was so I could attribute it correctly, but they said that Ivan Ilyich died so that we might live. And I love that idea. Just that to me is like the perfect book to start with, to get a discussion going, to get people into something a little bit older that they may not have read or maybe haven't read in a really long time, want to get back into. So that's what we'll be doing. So 2 weeks from now, we will complete that book. You should have plenty of time in 2 weeks to get through that one. And then our first book discussion episode will be over Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I can't wait to read that one again and actually discuss it. I think I read that over like a Christmas break, because the way that our personal book club works is we read a big book in the fall, and then that usually ends late November, early December, and then we don't pick up another book until January. So over that period where we weren't reading anything together, I think that's whenever I read it. It is pretty short. I think I read it in like 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't wait to digest it a bit deeper and have some in-depth discussions with you guys.
Yeah, me too. It's been a while since I've read it. I think I was like in my mid-20s the last time I read it, and I have a feeling that, like a lot of those types of books, it's one that upon revisiting every different stage in your adulthood probably hits a little bit harder or a little bit different. So it'll be good.
Yeah.
It might get a little it won't be morbid, but it's going to get a little real, I think.
Man,
sure.
what a fast start. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. And do we want to talk a little bit too about like just what people can expect with longer books, with multiple, it may take a couple weeks to finish. Just from like what our podcast is going to be like.
Yeah, I think eventually we will work our way up to books that are more in the realm of between 500 and 1,000 pages, maybe even occasionally. We won't do a lot of those in a row or anything like that. I've learned from our book club that there are a handful of books that have been put in a pile called book club killers. And Moby Dick was one of those book club killers. It's a wonderful book, but it was difficult to keep everybody in that one. So there are a few things that I'll probably steer away from for this format. But for longer things, we'll come up with kind of a schedule of reading. I'll try to end our portion in like a logical place. We'll discuss that portion, and then we'll have, another 2 weeks to get through the next one. So there may be some books that are spread out over, 3 or 4 episodes potentially, maybe even longer. Like if I finally drag these guys into doing Infinite Jest, that may take a season of podcasting. But yeah, that's more or less, I think, what the cadence would be.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think too, this medium in particular is great because it's like you can read at your own speed, right? You might not get to our reading schedule. It might take you 3 weeks, but our episode will still be there. So when you finally catch up, you can listen to it on your own time. But that's what's great, right? That's what's perfect about this. Yeah,
For sure. I feel like it's also important to point out that like the perspective we're coming from and what we're offering with this podcast, because none of us have English degrees. We're not snooty literary people. I think I've made it abundantly clear that I'm probably the dumbest one on this podcast, but
You are far from you're the only one here with a master's degree.
That's true.
well, that's okay. All right. But we're not literary people, and we're not trying to pretend to be either. But what we're trying to do is essentially, the way I look at it is wanting us to franchise the community that we've built with our own book club, where we have a group of guys that that's really an amalgamation of all of our like separate friend groups kind of being merged together. And we have developed like these, deep friendships with all these people that, like my brother-in-law is now good friends with the guy who produces Taylor's Records. And we to the point where every year we get a cabin and do like a book club weekend where we hang out. And so like I want to facilitate that where people can join in on the discussion and chat in the comments and share their thoughts on the books, but also hopefully get their friends to start reading as well and have their own discussions, and hopefully have their own book club weekends that they go with their friends to a cabin and drink too many beers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I feel like we were all somewhat inspired by the stories of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien getting together in Oxford and, reading together and just like having that like, round table of discussion, sharing their writing and everything. And, but like, that's what's so great is like, it's something that is both productive and enriching and, brings you closer to your friends and helps you learn more about each other, because like we've had some really heated discussions sometimes on the outcomes like of, things that are happening in the book, things that we read the same words but had completely different perspectives on it. But like we learned so much about each other, and it was like really fruitful to go through those things together. And but that's again really probably about the only way that you could have those discussions, in a healthy way is through a book, is through discussing it, through the narrative of a tale. So that's what's been great. It's just been a really good medium for discussion, and that's what I think we all want to your point, Jensen, bring out to everyone and let them hopefully go find their own, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien discussions, happening.
I would love to hear from y'all. Since we've started the book club, think of a book that you had never heard of before and you had no idea what you were getting into going into it, and how it surprised you. Something, maybe something that you even felt you weren't going to enjoy, that you ended up enjoying, or even something that you thought you were going to love that you did not love, or something like that. But I'd be interested to hear of something that you were not aware of that you were surprised by.
Almost every book that we've read, I hadn't heard of. And before the book club actually started, you had suggested what is that? It's the German author. Rubashov was the main character.
Oh, Arthur
Darkness
Kessler.
at Noon.
Yeah, Darkness at Noon. Yeah.
Darkness at Noon. So you suggest that. I love that book. I'd love for us to read it with this at some point. But I made the mistake of reading the foreword to that book, and it ruined the ending. And like I get it, like the book is like 70 years old at this point, but at the same time, like I'm reading it for the first time. Like, don't give away the ending in the first paragraph of the foreword, please. Like,
that's a great point. We'll make it a point. We'll make this note that as we go through these books, let's look at the editions, especially the editions that we recommend for people to pick up, and if there are spoilers in the foreword, let's do a spoiler alert. Yeah. That's actually a great thing to avoid.
Yeah. Since then I have taken the practice of ignoring the foreword and skipping straight to chapter 1 unless somebody explicitly says to start with a foreword because of that. But I've gone into every book that we've read without having any kind of prior knowledge of what the story is. And I love being able to really feel like I'm living in the world and watching the story unfold. for me personally, I really enjoy that. And then as we're talking in the book, like somebody, like we talk about something and you or somebody else that like that's looked up will tell about, you know, a fact about the author and like where he was whenever he was writing it or something like that, that adds some additional context. That's really cool. But the book that I thought I was going to love but ended up hating was Moby Dick. I hate that book so much. Like I have a little bookshelf in here that's got everything either I've already read or things that are on the docket for me to read, and I refuse to put that book up. It is in a drawer in my nightstand because I hate that book. I kind of want to take it in the backyard and burn it.
I did not have that experience with that book. There were definitely parts of it that were a little bit harder to get through, but I all opinions are welcome here. I thought that there are certain parts of that book that are as good as writing can possibly be. But I hear your criticism.
200 pages of whale anatomy is not good writing in my
But
opinion.
you know a lot about whales now, don't you?
I'm pushing it out of my brain.
What about you, Will?
Oh man. Well, let me say too, like, I knew about Crime and Punishment. It's just one of those, like, you know, just those books, those novels that, you know, you just hear the name because it's just so impactful. But I had zero interest in reading it, honestly, because I was just like, I don't feel like I'm gonna have the context for this. Like, you know, this is a translation of a translation potentially, you know, and I was just like, what am I gonna pull from it? This, you know, seriously, and just found it to be just so complex and just so many things to unpack. And I loved reading that with y'all because that was, I was able to get that context that I needed. And Taylor, like, again, we would go into these conversations. I remember that was our first big book I think we read for a book club, right? Where we had our first cabin night.
It might have been the first book that we read with the book club. I think I threw you guys to the wolves.
Yeah, actually, that was rude, but no, it was genuinely like I just had no interest in reading it, and then when I got into it, we could break it down and really see the parts, you know, for what it was as a whole. I found myself just, it really left a mark on me, and really enjoyed that. I would say second, Moby Dick, probably not my favorite, but, you know, again, to your point, like there are some great points in it. I want to also say, just like, since this book club has happened, like, I can't stop talking about or reading Kurt Vonnegut. Like, I didn't realize what I was missing. I just genuinely did not realize what I was missing. Mm-hmm. And I think partially because, you know, you hear about Slaughterhouse-Five. It's a lot on a lot of high school reading lists. Mm-hmm. I didn't actually have to read that in high school. It never was on our reading list at my school, unfortunately. But maybe, and you know what? Honestly, maybe I wasn't prepared to read that until I got, later in my life. But like his writing style, his humor, his ability to, you know, find beautiful moments and really just like pull you into these characters and lessons about life is just unmatched in my opinion. And now I just cannot stop reading Kurt Vonnegut. Like, again, I feel like I just want all Kurt Vonnegut tattoos, like all over my body. Like, seriously, yeah. I know, Jensen, you've got it. Yeah. I think I'm really appreciative of that because I hold on to a lot of what I've learned and read in his books, and I think I recall them on a regular basis. So that's definitely an honor.
No, that's awesome. I love that people can still discover, like, you know, we're all in our 30s, and I know that we're not old, but we've known each other for so long that it feels like that we've had this really, really long life, I think. And it's cool that still, like, you know, transitioning into this stage of our lives, we can still find our favorite thing. You know, there's still a favorite author out there for you. There's still a favorite book out there, which is exciting. It's like there's a lot of life to discover in these books. And I hope that comes across for some of y'all that are listening, that you too can discover your favorite something. I think for myself, I was just thinking about this as you guys were talking. One of the biggest misconceptions that I had when I started getting into books was I picked up a handful of Hemingway novels, and I sort of had this conception in my head that, just because of Hemingway's public persona as like this man's man, brawny, surviving airplane crashes, going on safaris and hunting, big game and all this kind of stuff. I thought that I was in for very different books when I started reading him, and I kind of expected, I don't know, maybe more adventures, that were more, just almost more Jack London-y, just like The Call of the Wild, like there's not to denigrate. I wasn't trying to, denigrate that book or anything. I was just saying that was more of what I was expecting. And I didn't expect to read somebody that was like so vulnerable and in touch with his emotions as Hemingway is. And maybe that, other people will disagree with the way that I read it. Maybe it just hit me a certain way, but like the way that he writes about his characters, like internal feelings and like how aware they all are about how they feel a lot of the time was really surprising to me. And he's still just like, as far as like American authors go, just one of the best at that gut punch, So surprised by that when I started reading him.
Yeah, I love that. He really is. His writing style is one of a kind, and I mean, there's a reason he's a legend, right? He's yeah. It's so simple yet so powerful. It's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever seen anybody. They'll talk shit about Hemingway because he writes so economically, is what some people will call it, because he writes like it's a newspaper. But I think because of how simple he writes, it leaves all of that space and cuts out all the flowery language to cut straight to the emotion that he's trying to convey. And I have felt that his books have given the most vivid imagery out of several things that we've read.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To finish up, I'm curious. It's funny, Will, you mentioned at the beginning that East of Eden is your favorite book, and it's actually mine as well. After we read that, like I finished the book and I was on my like back patio, and I finished the book and I put it down and had to walk around in the backyard for 10 minutes.
In pace.
Yeah. It hit me so hard. And so like I know that you and I share that, but I don't know if you have a second favorite. And Taylor, I'm curious what your favorite book is, and I think that'd be a good way to finish up.
Yeah. Will, do you want to go ahead?
You can start. I'll follow you.
Yeah. I mean, East of Eden is a great pick. I also love that novel. I think I read that for the first time in my early 20s and then got to revisit it with you guys recently when I was in my early 30s. And, I already joked that, we're not that old and I sound like I think we are, but I know we're not. But it was a completely different stage of life the two times that I read that book. And, I mean, maybe... I don't know. In my opinion, maybe the best American novel ever. I mean, it's got to be in the top 5 American novels that I've read. But my number one pick has got to go, and this, is going to be maybe a little bit of a cliche answer, but we one of the rules of book club, if book club is like Fight Club, there's several rules, and rule number 1 of book club is tell everyone about book club, and rule number 2 is we don't gatekeep. So if you have a cliche pick that you think is your favorite novel, then that is a completely valid answer and you are correct. So my favorite novel that I've read it maybe 4 times now, read it once with y'all, is The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I read that for the first time when I was 22. Well, I say I read it. I looked at the pages and flipped through them as I said the words in my head. I understood a little bit of it then, but it didn't quite hit me I read it again. I started to piece it together, but it was like this book that I was so determined to like understand because I could feel like so much richness in it. And after the second read through, it clicked for some reason, and maybe it was the translation that I switched to, and I feel like it has almost everything to say about life in a lot of ways, and at least for the way my brain works or for my taste, it just checks all the boxes. All the characters are so vivid. There's really great moments of humor. There's one of the best, in my opinion, like philosophical little interludes in right in the middle of it with the Grand Inquisitor, which I've had to go over with a fine-tooth comb so many times. I feel like it grows up with you. I've read it at all these stages of life, like I've mentioned with other books, and it's like I feel like I get something deeper out of it every time, depending on the amount of life I've managed to live in between rereads. So that one's got to be my favorite. Perhaps it'll be supplanted by something else one day, but for me, that's just as good as it gets. I love it.
I have a funny story. So my wife and I were hanging out last night, and she's reading one of those book talk trilogies right now, and so she was excited about telling me about it. And so she caught me up on all the different things going on in the book, and I was like, well, you got to talk about a book, so I'm going to talk about a book. There's a father that's got 3 sons, and out of the 4 of them, each of them show a shitty aspect of your own personality and how that fleshes itself out in unique different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's it's a total banger. I love it.
Yeah. Apparently, I've ranted about that book before because I got to what I had said, and she was like, "You've told me about this book before."
It's just one that sticks with you
For sure.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, like you mentioned, East of Eden is probably my favorite book of all time. There's just so much to unpack, and I think I mentioned earlier on this pod that I feel it even more now that I'm a dad too. So just because there's so much there, but for the longest time, I mean, you talk about cliches, like it was Fellowship of the Ring for me, like J.R.R. Tolkien.
It's hard to beat, man.
It just, I mean, if you think about what it was, especially when he wrote it and released it at the time, it just set basically the standard for what, long fantasy, just really narratives in general, with just this deep brotherhood attached to it. And also I think too, like you mentioned, Taylor, we've been friends now. Actually, we've been friends more years than
we
before.
haven't.
Yeah, exactly. Like, now we've surpassed that. And I think brotherhood was, I mean, at an early age, was really core. I have an older brother who I, love, and obviously was able to have so many brothers, I think, just throughout my friendships. And when I read that book at a pretty young age, I think sometime in my teens, I might have been around the same time the movies came out. I can't totally remember the timing, but I just remember seeing that camaraderie and just holding on to all the characters and kind of the desperation and the battle of good versus evil and the internal struggle, and there's just so many things there. And that'd be another great one to add to this if we ever want to do a Tolkien.
Maybe we'll do a Tolkien section
series. Yeah,
I do love that book.
Yeah, it's great.
This might get me kicked out of this, but I have never read any Tolkien.
You haven't?
I've seen the films, but I've never read the books.
Oh man, we'll have to do something. I mean, you at least owe it to yourself to sit down over the weekend and try to read The Hobbit. It's quick, it's so fun, it's so good. I mean, obviously Lord of the Rings is a little bit more of an undertaking because it's really long, but yeah, you should do that, man. They're really good. I know everybody says it. It's like become a cliche, like we said, but like, a lot of these classics are classics for a reason because they're enduring and they're, they show an artist at like the full width of their power, as a writer, stuff like that. It's a really good one. So maybe we'll visit that at some point. Maybe
Jensen,
we've already passed the 20-year anniversary of the movies, but we can find an anniversary in there somewhere to revisit those.
The 24th anniversary.
Yeah.
I feel like it would be a really good like Christmas read. You know, it's not just kind of just it
It's
feels
a good cozy one. Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. And Jensen, you know, like when you go and you say you watch a movie and then you immediately Google the ending and you want like all the backstory and maybe see other people's interpretations and everything. If you've only watched the movies, you start reading the books and the movies are obviously incredible cinema.
Oh, yeah.
They just to even attempt to make Tolkien on screen is unbelievable, incredible. So don't get me wrong there, but to then go and read the books, you're like, whoa, there's so much here that like it could never have been shown. But like the way that like the depth in the world of like Middle Earth, it's pretty awesome. It's really stellar. So definitely worth it. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, we'll get to that one eventually, for sure.
For sure.
A lot of the books that we've read in our book club, for a while we had a run of just like really depressing existentialist stuff, and so I would tell my wife about I'm like, oh, you really need to read this book, it's so good. And she's like, all the things that you read are so depressing.
Yeah, I had a really similar discussion with my wife the other night because she had finished what she was reading and she asked for like recommendations, and I was like, are you sure? Because my library is not exactly uplifting all the time. I mean, what did I ended up giving her? Oh, I maybe gave her like one of the Wheel of Time books, the first one, which those are really fun too, fantasy books. But because her stipulation was none of that sad Russian stuff.
Yeah, it's funny when I whipped out Mother Night on the beach. She's like, "What's that book about?" And I started telling her. She's like, "That's a beach read." I was like,
every read's a beach read if you're on the beach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love Kurt Vonnegut. I find myself not having to Google what words mean as often with him.
Yeah.
Hey, Jensen, you should share what you do when you find a word you don't know, because I think that's an awesome thing.
That's a good thing.
Oh yeah. So because I have the vocabulary of something between a sixth grader and a sailor, I find myself not knowing a lot of words in books, and so I will Google the definition, and then I have a spreadsheet on my computer with all the words that I don't know and the definitions, so that I can like go back and like essentially have my own like vocabulary quiz that I can create for myself. I don't
That's awesome.
I don't reference it as often as I should. I should like practice learning and applying those words, but like that's definitely a big thing that I do is I come across a word and we'll look it up. And I think the act of just like writing it down and then writing down the definition, whenever that I see that word again, I either remember exactly what it means or I remember enough of what it means that I am not taken out of the narrative.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
Such a good practice.
It's a great practice. I do the opposite. When I come upon a word that I don't know, I just pretend like I know what it means.
For sure.
Hey, it's worked out so far.
Yeah, and if you say it confidently enough in a sentence, most people go along with it.
Yeah,
I find
because they don't know what it means either. Yeah,
exactly.
God, the first time I told you guys that, I was just like waiting to get roasted. Like, oh, dummy, you don't know words. But
there's a lot of words, dude. There's a lot.
Yeah, I guess I give you guys enough content to roast me. My vocabulary doesn't have to be one of them. And
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
That's
No,
low on the list of things we can make fun of you about. For
Yeah,
sure.
I saw somebody said that one time too, like that you should never make fun of somebody for mispronouncing a word because they probably learned it from a book, and that's a good practice too. We're not going to make fun of people for pretentious reasons like that.
Yeah.
I'll find something more high-minded to make fun of you about.
Or low so-minded. Yeah. Well, I feel like we came full circle back around to talking about like a Russian novel, and then I spun us off on a different tangent. If we don't wrap it up now, we'll talk for another 3 hours. So we will be discussing The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. I think we can put a Amazon link in the description so that you can pick it up. And looking forward to discussing that with you guys.
It's been great hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, boys, have a good one, and yeah, we'll see you at the next one.
See ya.
Shelf Destruct!